When they asked my sister's kids what they wanted to eat, my children smiled. They straightened up in their seats, eyes bright, hands on their laps. Because in their hearts, they believed they were next. They believed the question would come to them too. They believed for one brief, fragile moment that someone in that room cared enough to ask what they wanted. But the question never came. And then, the silence. That kind of silence that's not quiet, but full. Full of everything no one's saying. Full of glances exchanged between people who already made up their minds. Full of the weight of being overlooked, not once, but constantly. That silence was loud. It told my children, "You don't matter here." And then came the line. Sharp. Cruel. Final. They can eat whatever scraps are left in the kitchen. Scraps. That word hit me like a slap. Not because it was new, but because it was finally honest. For years, we'd been dressing up our family dinners in good manners and fake smiles. But that sentence? That was the truth. That was the moment the curtain dropped, and everyone saw what had been there all along. My children were not guests in my parents' home. They were barely even family. They were treated like burdens, like afterthoughts, like leftovers. And I watched frozen as my daughter's expression crumbled. She lowered her eyes. Not out of shame, but out of instinct. Because she knew. She knew this wasn't the first time, and deep down, she feared it wouldn't be the last. My son didn't say a word. He just gripped the edge of the chair, knuckles white, pretending to stay strong. But I saw the shift in him. That flicker in his eyes where innocence used to live. The moment something inside him stopped believing that family meant safety. And me? I just sat there. Still. Numb. Because I didn't know whether to cry or stand up and scream. But then something strange happened. I looked at my children, really looked at them. I saw two kids who had been taught to be kind, to wait their turn, to respect their elders, to say please and thank you even when no one said it back. And I realized they'd been learning the wrong lesson from me. Because every time I stayed quiet, every time I said nothing while they were pushed aside, I was teaching them that it was okay. That they should accept disrespect if it came from someone older, or richer, or related. That silence is more important than self-respect. And that night, it stopped. Because something inside me rose. Something that had been buried under years of keeping the peace and being the bigger person. And I knew we had to leave. Not just the house. Not just the dinner. But the lie. The lie that blood is thicker than dignity. That tradition should cost us our children's self-worth. That family love is something you have to earn. Because my children? They shouldn't have to earn their place at the table. They shouldn't have to sit quietly while others are served first again and again. They shouldn't have to lower their standards just because everyone else has lowered theirs. That night, I stopped trying to keep the illusion alive. I took my children's hands and we stood up. Not in rage. Not in tears. But in truth. Because here's the thing. You can't protect your kids from every heartbreak in this world. But you can protect them from growing up thinking that they deserve less. And when that protection means walking out of the only house you ever called home, you walk. Because the moment your kids stop expecting kindness from their own family, that's the moment you realize it's not family anymore. It's just history. And history doesn't raise your children. You do. So we left. And what happened next? What unfolded after that quiet, heartbreaking dinner? It didn't just change our lives. It redefined them. It rewrote everything we thought we knew about loyalty, love, and what it really means to stand up, not just for yourself, but for the people who are still learning how to stand at all. And before I tell you how the story ends, if you've ever watched a child's smile fade because of an adult's cruelty, subscribe. If you haven't, comment below. Tell me why you think this kind of silence is okay. But if you felt even a fraction of what I felt that night, then you already know. It's time to listen. They looked like the kind of family you'd see in a magazine ad for something expensive: linen napkins, generational wealth, Christmas cards with matching outfits. Perfect smiles. Polished shoes. Everything in its place. And for years, I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, that illusion was real. They had the house. Not just any house, a home that made strangers slow down as they passed by. set deep on a stretch of tree-lined road on the East Coast, the kind of estate that had been in the family for decades. White columns, black shutters, a circular driveway wide enough to turn a small parade around in. The landscaping was sculpted, almost surgical, hedges that looked like they were measured with a ruler, fountains that always worked, even in the winter. The house didn't just say money, it whispered legacy. And inside, every detail was curated for impression. Chandeliers that hung like threats from the ceiling. Rugs older than me. Walls full of oil paintings, not of ancestors, but of art bought at auctions where names mattered more than price tags. Glass cabinets held china that had never been used, and silverware that probably hadn't touched a plate in a decade. You walk into that house, and it's hard not to feel small. And my sister? She fit in there like she'd been born with the blueprint. Always had. She was the golden one. You know the type. The one who always had the right dress. The one who never had to be told twice. The one who got the best seat at the table, the first slice of cake, the loudest applause. She moved through life like everything was a runway. Hair always styled, smile always prepared, nails freshly done even when she claimed she'd had no time for herself. My parents? They adored her. Adored like she was their greatest achievement. She never had to ask for anything. Somehow, what she wanted always showed up, gift-wrapped, early, and better than she imagined. I, on the other hand, was the one who didn't ask for help. Not because I didn't need it, but because I'd stopped expecting it. I was the one who didn't make a fuss. The one who knew how to manage on her own. Those were their words. Praise, they called it. Independence. Strength. But really, it was permission. Permission to overlook me. Because I made it easy. I worked. Hard. I juggled jobs and daycare and sick days. I packed lunches while half asleep and showed up to every school meeting even when I had deadlines. My kids wore clean clothes, brought snacks to share, said thank you every time they should have been saying, why not me? And the funny thing is, I was proud of that. Still am. But inside that house, none of that mattered. In that house, I was invisible. There were framed photos in the main hallway, vacations, birthdays, graduations. My sister's kids in matching swimwear on the Amalfi Coast. Her anniversary dinner at a vineyard. Her baby shower thrown at a country club. My family? Not a single frame. Not one. The only picture of my kids in that entire mansion was a wallet-sized school portrait taped to the inside of the fridge door, beside the staff grocery list. Our gifts were thoughtful. That's what my mother called them. The kind of thoughtful you say through gritted teeth when someone hands you a candle they made by hand and you're still hoping for something from Tiffany. My daughter once spent weeks making a scrapbook for her grandparents. She drew the cover, cut out little flowers, even wrote a note on the back in cursive she taught herself. My parents flipped through it once, said it was sweet, then placed it on the coffee table, under a tray of drinks. The next time we visited, it was gone. Meanwhile, my sister's daughter gifted a glittery rock, just a rock, dipped in glue and sparkles. It ended up on the mantel, displayed like a sculpture. That's how it always was. When I brought wine. Oh, you shouldn't have. When she brought wine. This is our favorite. When I brought dessert. Too many carbs, but thank you. When she brought dessert. You always know what we like. Same table. Different rules. And the praise? Never in public. If I ever got any, it came in whispers. Pulled aside in the kitchen. You're doing so well considering your situation. I honestly don't know how you manage. I'd never be able to survive your kind of schedule. Meanwhile, my sister? She got toasts. My father would stand and raise a glass for her just for switching her kids' school or redecorating a guest room. They celebrated her for doing the bare minimum and pitted me for doing the most. But I took it. I swallowed it. For years. Because I told myself it was worth it. It was family. It was tradition. And the tradition that stung the most? Sunday dinners. Every week, like clockwork. We were expected to show up clean, polite, and on time. And if we were late, even by a minute, the comments would start. My parents insisted on it. Said it was important for the children. Said it was how families stayed close. But let me tell you something. Closeness isn't the same as connection. Because those dinners? They weren't about bonding. They were about performing. My sister's family would arrive in designer outfits. Her kids came with freshly unboxed toys, talking over everyone like they were holding court. My parents would smile at their chaos like it was charming. They've got such personality, they'd say. So bright, so free. My kids? They'd walk in with secondhand shoes and practice manners. They waited before speaking. They said, "Excuse me." They never ran in the house. And every week, I'd watch them slowly fold themselves smaller, hoping someone would notice them. Hoping someone would ask about their week, their art, their test scores, their dreams. Instead, my mother would coo over Madison's new charm bracelet, ignoring the handmade necklace my daughter wore with quiet pride. My father would ruffle Zach's hair and ask about his soccer team, never mind that my son had just finished building a solar system model that lit up on command. I thought, maybe it would get better. Maybe one day, someone would see my children the way I saw them. But week after week, the message stayed the same. You're here, but you don't count. You're family, but only by default. You're part of the picture, but never the frame. And then came that dinner, the one with the takeout menu, where the truth stopped pretending, where the illusion shattered. But I'll get to that soon. Because before the fallout, before the walkout, before the real story began, we had to sit, one last time, at the table where we were always included, but never welcomed. You don't grow up knowing you're the other child. Not right away. At first, everything just feels normal. You think every family has little differences. That some kids get more hugs because they're younger. That some get more attention because they're a handful. You don't have words for it when you're 5 or 6. You just feel it. Like how water feels cold. You can't explain it. You just know. It started small. My sister got the bedroom with the window seat. The one that faced the sunrise and filled with golden light every morning like it had its own spotlight. She got the bigger closet, the soft carpet, the new furniture. I got the spare room. No sun. Just the streetlight that flickered at night and made shadows on my wall. My closet door stuck, and the dresser was the same one my mom used when she was a girl. They called it charming. I called it creaky, but it was fine. I told myself it didn't matter. Rooms were just walls and a bed. Then there was the piano. She asked for it after watching a recital on TV once. That was all it took. A week later, a baby grand was delivered and placed in the formal living room. She took lessons. She played the first 5 notes of Twinkle Twinkle and got a standing ovation from my grandparents, like she'd just performed at Carnegie Hall. I asked for art supplies. Markers. Just markers. My mom told me to use what we had at home. One Christmas, she got a dress from a boutique in New York. Custom made. Velvet, pearl buttons, delicate lace. She wore it to church and everyone said she looked like a doll. I got a coat. Functional. Warm. It'll last you years, my dad said. It always came down to function versus fantasy. She got sparkle. I got sense. And every time I tried to speak up, every time I wondered out loud if it was fair, I was told not to compare. That life wasn't about keeping score. That I was stronger and she needed more. So I stopped asking. And I started watching. Like the time she came home with a C+ in biology and my parents clapped. You tried your best. That's what matters, they said. They took her out for dinner. I once brought home an A+, first in the entire class, and my dad barely looked up from his newspaper. That's expected, he said. You always do well in school. That's the thing about expectations. They sound like praise until you realize they're just a way to avoid giving you any. When she slammed doors and shouted at our mom, she's going through a phase. When I cried quietly in my room, you're too sensitive. When she made a mess in the kitchen, at least she's trying to be independent. When I made dinner for everyone on a school night, don't get used to applause. It followed me everywhere. Into high school, into college, into adulthood. She dropped out of one major, then another. My parents paid for every semester, every switch. She went to Europe for a soul-searching year. Came back with stories, pictures, souvenirs. They threw her a welcome back party. I got into college on a scholarship. Took a double course load. Worked part-time. Graduated with honors. They mailed me a card. Not even a call. And when I moved out, rented a small apartment with secondhand furniture and thrift store curtains, I was proud of what I'd built. I invited them over. They came. Once. Said it was quaint. Said the area was a bit noisy. They never came back. But when my sister got engaged, they hosted an engagement brunch, booked a vineyard, flew in guests. My mom cried when she saw the ring. When I got married, they asked if we had thought about a prenup. They didn't cry. They didn't toast. They didn't even bring a gift. And still, I showed up. For birthdays. For holidays. For family photos where we were always told to scooch in, like we were extras in our own story. I smiled through it. Bit my tongue. Told myself I was being dramatic. Told myself it wasn't a contest. That love looks different sometimes. But deep down, I knew what was happening. I was there, but never seen. And you start to believe that maybe you don't need to be seen. Maybe your role is to hold the camera, to cheer quietly, to show up clean, kind, and grateful for leftovers. But that belief? It's poison. Slow, quiet, disguised as humility. It makes you shrink your needs, your voice, yourself. And the worst part? It teaches your children to do the same. That's what I realized that night at the dinner table when my kids were skipped over like they didn't exist. When they waited, hoping, trusting, just like I had. And I thought, no, not them. Not like this. This ends here. Because once upon a time, I sat in their place. I know exactly what it feels like to be the invisible one in your family. And if you do too. If you've ever had to clap for someone else while you were breaking inside. If you've ever walked out of a room and realized no one noticed. Then maybe you understand what it costs to stay quiet for too long. And if you do, subscribe. Not just to the story, but to your own. And if you've never felt that, then maybe it's time to look around and ask yourself who in your life is still waiting to be seen. It's a strange kind of heartbreak, the one that doesn't come from being hurt directly, but from watching it happen to your children. Watching them go through what you went through. Feeling every sting they can't explain yet, because you remember exactly what it felt like when it happened to you. My kids are kind. Thoughtful in a way that you don't see much anymore. They're the type who hold the door open for strangers, who say please and thank you without being told, who bring hand-drawn cards to birthday parties instead of showing up empty-handed. They notice when someone's quiet in a room. They help stack chairs without being asked. They give away the bigger slice of cake. My daughter once spent 2 weekends making a watercolor bookmark for my mother, carefully painted roses, neat lettering, even laminated it at school so it wouldn't smudge. She wrapped it in tissue paper, tied it with yarn, and handed it over with that kind of soft, nervous smile kids wear when they're proud but afraid of being disappointed. My mother opened it during dinner, barely looked at it. Said, "Oh, that's sweet, honey," and then slipped it into her purse like it was a receipt. That same night, Madison, my sister's daughter, gave Grandma a charm she got from a vending machine. A little plastic heart on a keyring. It lit up when you pressed a button. My mother squealed. "You always bring me the cutest things, Madison," she said. She clipped it to her handbag right there at the table. Bragged about it like it was made of gold. My daughter sat quietly, folded her napkin, smiled anyway, because she's polite. Because I've raised her to believe that kindness matters, even when it isn't returned. But even the kindest children start to notice. And mine have noticed. They've noticed that every time we arrive at Grandma's house, Zach and Madison are greeted with hugs and loud excitement, like a surprise party. "You're getting so tall. Look at you, sweetheart." My kids get a glance, a nod, maybe a tired hello. They've noticed that their cousins get to run in the house, jump on the furniture, leave toys scattered across the floor. And nobody says a word. No one corrects them. No one tells them to watch their manners. But the minute my son reaches for a second cookie, there's a quiet but sharp, "Let's not be greedy, darling." When my daughter accidentally drops her fork, "Careful, sweetie. We don't want to scratch the table." They've started adjusting their posture at these dinners. Sitting up straighter, speaking less, trying harder. And I hate it, because I remember exactly when I started doing the same thing. At first, I thought it was in my head, that I was being sensitive. That maybe the difference in treatment wasn't so stark. Maybe I was just looking for it. But then came the gifts. Birthdays, Christmas, any occasion. Zach gets the new gaming console. Madison opens branded dolls, tablets, clothes from boutiques with tags still on. They shriek, tear wrapping paper, toss things aside. "It's not the color I wanted," Madison once said about a purse. Everyone laughed. My little diva, my mom beamed. And my kids? They get socks. Books with bent corners. Notebooks with price stickers still on. A secondhand backpack, just like new. One year, my son got a toy drone that didn't even come with batteries, and when he opened it and quietly asked if we could fly it, my dad said, "Well, if you want to use it, you'll need to buy your own batteries." It's just a gift, not a full package. A full package. That's the phrase that stuck with me. Because that's what my kids deserve. Not just in presents, but in presence. In time. In care. In fairness. But they don't get the full package. Not here. They get the edited version of love. The frugal version. The polite minimum. They get praised for being mature, while their cousins are called spirited and fun. And that word, mature? It's not a compliment when it's used to dismiss your feelings. It's code for, you can handle being ignored without making a fuss. It's a pat on the head while someone else gets a parade. I watch my kids swallow that disappointment. I watch them push it down, smile through it, try not to show that they notice. Because they don't want to seem ungrateful. They don't want to cause trouble. Because I've raised them that way. I raised them the way I was raised, to be quiet, respectful, grateful. But I never wanted them to inherit this. I never wanted them to learn how to be invisible from me. Because it hurts 10 times more when you see it from the outside. When you recognize your own childhood playing out in slow motion, frame by frame, but this time in their bodies. And the worst part? You start to realize that all those times you told yourself, maybe it's not that bad, you were lying. Because now you see it clearly. It is that bad. It was that bad. And it has to stop. They don't say anything. Not yet. But I can tell. I can tell from the way my daughter hesitates now when she makes something. "Do you think Grandma will like this?" she asks, eyes low, voice unsure. I can tell from the way my son double-checks his shirt for stains before we walk up the driveway. The way he asks, "Is this jacket okay?" Like he's afraid of not being enough. I can tell from the way they cling a little closer to me during those visits. And I can tell they're waiting for me to say something. To do something. To prove to them that being kind doesn't mean accepting unkindness. That being part of a family doesn't mean sitting at the edge of the picture. And that being raised right doesn't mean letting people treat you wrong. So I sit through these dinners, watching the pattern repeat. Watching the same injustice I swallowed start pressing down on them. And with every smile they force, every little moment they shrink themselves to stay in the room, I feel the weight of what I used to accept grow heavier in my chest. Because now, it's not just about how they treat me. It's about how I let them treat my children. And that's not something I can carry anymore. It was a Sunday like every other Sunday, and yet, it wasn't. From the moment I woke up, something felt off. The kids had both caught a cough earlier in the week, nothing serious, but enough to drain their energy. Enough to make everything take longer. Getting dressed. Packing the bag. Double-checking for tissues. I was already behind before we even stepped out the door. And then the car. I drive an old Honda Civic. Faithful, but tired. That morning, it decided it didn't want to start. Battery sputtered, engine coughed, then silence. I sat behind the wheel, breathing through my teeth, trying not to curse loud enough for the kids to hear. It eventually turned over on the 4th try, but we were already 30 minutes late by then. Still, I had made dessert the night before. An apple cobbler. The kind that fills the kitchen with cinnamon and warmth. The kind that makes even hard weeks feel soft again. I wrapped it carefully, packed it next to the kids' art folders. My daughter had made a new drawing for Grandma. My son had written a short poem he wanted to read aloud. They were excited. And I was tired. But I smiled. Because that's what we do, right? We show up. We bring something. We try again. By the time we pulled into the driveway, the sun was already dipping low. Their house was lit up like a catalog, warm yellow windows, perfectly trimmed hedges, classical music floating from somewhere inside. My sister's car, of course, was already parked right in front. Her brand new SUV. Clean, shiny, expensive. The kind of car you don't drive, you display. We walked up the steps, and even the doormat felt smug. I knocked once. Then again. Marjorie, the housekeeper, opened the door. Kind eyes. A tired smile. They're already in the living room, she said softly, taking our coats. Then, under her breath, today's tense. Tense. I should have turned around right then. But we walked in. The room was full, voices bouncing, laughter ringing from corners. My sister was stretched out on the velvet couch like a queen at rest. Her kids were playing some loud game on their tablets. My parents were perched in their usual spots, wine glasses in hand, half listening to whatever story Diane was spinning this time. No one looked up when we walked in. No, hello. No, you made it. No, how are the kids? Just silence. Until my mother glanced over her shoulder. Oh, there you are. I held up the cobbler. We brought dessert. She waved vaguely. Just leave it in the kitchen. No compliment. No, it smells amazing. No, thank you. We stepped into the room. My kids moved carefully, like they always do, trying not to bump into things, not to speak too loudly, not to make themselves too known. And I just stood there, waiting for the feeling to pass. But it didn't. Because something was off. Everyone seemed jittery. Distracted. My father was flipping through his leather-bound notebook, murmuring about stocks. My mother was scrolling her phone. My sister kept glancing toward the hallway like she was waiting for something or someone. After a few awkward minutes of surface talk, my mother clapped her hands lightly. Well, I'm too tired to cook tonight, she announced. We'll just order in. That stopped me. Because my mother? The woman who once called takeout lazy and low effort? Who believed dinner should be homemade or not served at all? She was ordering in? Something was definitely off. My father chimed in, we'll spare no expense. The children should have whatever they want. But when he said children, his eyes didn't even flick toward mine. They turned immediately to my sister's kids. What do you two want? My mother asked them, voice sweetened. Zach didn't even pause. Sushi, he said. The good kind. Like the place in the city with gold on it. Madison chimed in. I want pasta. With truffle. From Vincenzo's. And garlic bread. And the chocolate mousse. My mother smiled like they'd just recited poetry. My father nodded, pen scratching on paper. Excellent choices. My sister stretched, yawning dramatically. I'll have the seared salmon. And that sparkling water I like, the imported one. They turned to each other, confirming the rest of their orders. A discussion. A group effort. I waited. My kids waited. They sat on the edge of the love seat, hands folded, polite, watching the way kids do when they're trying to learn how to belong. Lily leaned over to her brother and whispered, maybe we can get burgers. Jason smiled. With fries. I nodded at them. Tell Grandma what you'd like. And then, my mother didn't even turn around. She just waved her hand. Your kids can eat whatever's left in the kitchen, she said flatly. They're not guests. The room went still. It wasn't said with anger. It was said with indifference. As if my children didn't exist as full people in that space. As if they were extras on the set of someone else's story. As if their hunger, their preferences, their very presence was an inconvenience to be managed quietly. And my kids? They froze. I saw my daughter's lips part like she wanted to say something, but then she stopped herself. She reached for her drawing instead. The one she made for Grandma. She held it close to her chest like a shield. My son blinked hard and looked at me. Then came the question. Soft. So soft I almost didn't hear it. Did we do something wrong, Mommy? I didn't answer right away. Because my throat was tight. Because my hands were shaking. Because there it was, the very moment I had feared. The moment they stopped believing that if they were good, they'd be treated well. The moment they realized kindness doesn't always buy you a seat at the table. The moment I watched their innocence start to slip away. And what do you say to your child when they ask that? When they think being skipped over, being dismissed, being told to eat scraps, might be their fault. You want to scream. You want to cry. but mostly you want to fix it. Because when they hurt, you hurt deeper. When they're disrespected, it cuts you twice, once for them and once for all the times it happened to you. And suddenly, you're no longer just a daughter trying to keep peace. You're a mother, and you know in your bones, this is where it ends. This right here, this table, this room, this moment. This is the line, and it's not going to be crossed again. Because silence? It's not strength when it teaches your children to accept less. It's surrender. And I wasn't going to surrender anymore. If this part broke your heart, don't just scroll past. Subscribe right now to Pure Revenge Stories. And if you don't want to, comment why. But you felt that, didn't you? It didn't hit me right away. That day at dinner, my focus was on my kids. On their faces. On the way they sat still after being skipped. On the way they forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. But as we packed up to leave, as I gathered their coats, thanked Marjorie for being the only warm presence in that house, something began to click. My sister followed me to the hallway. "You're leaving already?" she asked, voice high and sugar-coated. I nodded. "Yeah, long day. The kids are tired." She tilted her head in that performative way she always did. "You should stay. I was hoping we could catch up. Just us. Just us." That phrase. It should have sounded kind. Should have felt like an olive branch. But instead, it felt calculated. And sure enough, 2 days later, I got a text from my mother. "When are you free to talk? We have some family matters to discuss." Family matters. Not, "How are you?" Not, "The kids looked lovely Sunday." Not, "Thank you for the cobbler." Just business. I called her that evening. The kids were asleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened as she danced around the point for 10 long minutes. Then finally, "Your sister is going through a lot right now. She's had a few setbacks. Setbacks. Like it was a pothole in a street instead of a full collapse. Turns out, the luxury life wasn't so secure after all. Her husband? Gone. Not in the dramatic, cheating scandal way, no, he simply moved on. Left her the house, the bills, and no forwarding address. Quiet divorce. Minimal alimony. And a mountain of debt nobody wanted to speak out loud. The house? On the market. The SUV? Leased. Already repossessed. The boutique job? Let go after too many mental health days. She was drowning, but drowning quietly. Elegantly. Like everything else she did. And now, she was moving back in. Into the estate. Back into the same house she grew up in. The same one I used to walk home from after visits, watching its glowing windows from the bus stop, wondering what it felt like to be wanted there. But now she was coming home. And my parents? They weren't just taking her in. They were looking at me. They didn't say it directly. They never do. But it was all there, between the lines. She's going to need time to adjust. The kids are struggling emotionally. She doesn't have many people to rely on right now. You're so stable. So dependable. She needs you. That was the word that snapped it into focus for me. Need. They were asking me to become her lifeline. To shoulder her burdens. Quietly. Respectfully. Because that's who I've always been to them. Not the favorite. But the fallback. And they dressed it up in flattery. Told me I had such a generous spirit. That you've always been so level-headed. That family sticks together. But what they were really saying, "You're useful now." They wanted me to help fund her. To chip in when things got tight. Maybe help with groceries. School supplies. A little something toward bills. Just until she got back on her feet. Maybe even have her stay with us for a while, when things felt too tense at home. I asked, "And who's taking care of me?" There was silence. Then my mother said, "You don't need anything. You always land on your feet." As if being resilient meant I didn't deserve support. As if being responsible meant I should carry everyone else. And that's when it hit me. That dinner? It wasn't about seeing the kids. It wasn't about spending time together. It was the setup. They invited me to remind me of my place. To surround me with memories. To make me feel the pull of old guilt, of old loyalty, of being part of the family. So that when the real ask came, I'd be softened. So that I'd say yes. So that I'd feel too guilty to say no. But this time, I saw it clearly. They weren't asking, they were manipulating. And they'd been doing it for years. If you've ever been the one they only call when things go wrong, subscribe to Pure Revenge Stories. You deserve to be more than just their backup plan. And if you don't subscribe, drop a comment. Let me know why. But be honest, this one hit different, didn't it? I didn't storm out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead for fairness or demand apologies. I just stood up. My chair made a soft scraping sound across the polished hardwood floor. That sound said everything I didn't. I looked at my kids, my daughter still clutching her paper plate with 2 chicken nuggets, my son holding his water cup like it might spill if he moved too fast. They were watching me, unsure if this was just another time we'd pretend to be okay. We're leaving. I said it clearly. Not angry. Not tearful. Just final. No one at the table said anything. Not my mother, not my father, not my sister. Just the clinking of forks and the low hum of a conversation I was no longer a part of. My kids followed me to the door. My daughter didn't even put on her shoes right. My son forgot his jacket. Still, no one stopped us. I closed the front door gently behind me, like I had manners they never deserved. The silence outside hit harder than I expected. Cold air wrapped around us. My son reached for my hand, and I took it. My daughter leaned into my side. I unlocked the car and helped them in. I didn't say anything until we were 3 blocks away. Then I glanced in the rearview mirror. "You hungry?" My daughter nodded slowly. My son whispered, "Yeah." We didn't go home. I pulled onto the highway and drove into the city. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew it had to be somewhere different. Somewhere we'd never been before. Somewhere that didn't carry the weight of false smiles and invisible scars. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the lot of a restaurant I had driven past dozens of times, but never dared to enter. Glass windows, warm lighting, white tablecloths. The kind of place people like my sister posted about online. The kind of place I told myself wasn't for people like me. But tonight wasn't about what I deserved. It was about what my children did. I parked, got out, opened their doors. Inside, the host looked up from the podium, confused by our casual clothes and wind-blown hair. "Table for 3, I said. He hesitated, then led us to a quiet corner booth. My kids sat down slowly, wide-eyed, soaking in the chandeliers, the soft piano music, the flickering candles. The menus looked like books. My daughter traced her finger over the gold lettering. My son tried to sound out words he hadn't seen before. "I don't know what to get," he whispered. "Get anything," I told him. Everything. We ordered appetizers we couldn't pronounce. Entrees we didn't know how to eat. Dessert before dinner. Extra sides for no reason. No rules. No be grateful. No pretending. Just us. Halfway through the meal, my daughter leaned across the table and asked, "Mommy, are we rich now?" I almost laughed. But instead, I said, "No, baby. We're free." They smiled in a way they hadn't all day. A way that said they weren't waiting to be noticed. A way that said they finally believed they mattered. When dinner was done, we didn't go home yet. We drove to the lake quiet, calm, still. I pulled a blanket from the trunk and spread it on the grass. We sat there together, under the stars, no lights, no noise, just the sound of the wind and the water. And for once, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. Full of the peace that comes after you finally stop begging for a seat at a table that was never built for you. Full of the strength it takes to walk away, not in anger, but in certainty. Full of the love that exists when you stop waiting for it to be handed to you and instead, create it yourself. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't scroll through old photos or write a letter I'd never send. I just held my kids close, looked up at the sky, and let the quiet wrap around us like a promise. This was the beginning of something better. Not revenge. Reclamation. A new table. A new tradition. And no one, not my sister, not my parents, not the ghosts of every Sunday dinner I pretended to enjoy, would get to rewrite that. It was a week later. The silence had settled. Not just in the house, but in my chest. Like I had finally unplugged from something that had been draining me for decades without even knowing it. No one had called. Not my mother. Not my father. Not my sister. No, "Are you okay?" No, "What happened?" Just nothing. And maybe that silence hurt more than I wanted to admit. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a second, I almost ignored it. But something told me to answer. Hello. A pause on the other end. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years, but instantly knew. It's Eva. My cousin. My mother's sister's daughter. The one who'd moved across the country years ago. The one they never talked about unless it was in whispered judgment, divorce, therapy, single mom. I hadn't seen her since we were teenagers. And yet, somehow, her voice made something in me drop its guard. I heard what happened, she said. Or, what didn't happen. I've been watching from the edges for a long time. I didn't know what to say. I stood in my kitchen, still holding a spoon, still wearing yesterday's sweatshirt. I always knew you were the one holding it all together, she continued. They just made sure you never believed it. She asked if she could visit. Said she'd be passing through my city. I said yes before I even thought about it. She showed up the next day. Casual jeans. No makeup. A tray of fresh-baked bread in one hand and a box of Legos for my son in the other. My daughter ran up to her like she'd known her for years. We sat at the table, my table, and talked. And that's when everything shifted. She told me things I wasn't ready for. Things they had never told me. Things they hoped I'd never learn. My sister? The luxury, the lifestyle, the curated social media perfection, smoke and mirrors. Her business had collapsed over a year ago. Her marriage was hanging by threads. She had burned through her savings, moved back into the family estate under the guise of renovations, and was quietly being floated by our parents. And that dinner? That wasn't about family. That was about keeping up appearances. That was about slowly reeling me in because I was the only one left who still had steady footing. They needed me. They needed me more than I had ever needed them. Eva looked me in the eye and said it plain. You've always been the contingency plan. They just never had the decency to say thank you. We sat in silence for a while. Then she reached into her bag and handed me an envelope. Inside was a check. I stared at it, stunned. I sold a property a few months back, she said. I've been where you are. You don't need to say yes. But I want you to know someone sees you. Someone always did. That was the part that undid me. Not the check. Not the stories. Just that sentence. Someone sees you. It's strange how you can spend your entire life being visible, present, available, yet feel invisible at the same time. Like you're standing in a room full of people who know your name but never really see your face. Eva saw me, had seen me all along. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overly sensitive. I wasn't imagining the hurt. The neglect was real. The favoritism was real. The setup was real. And now, so was my freedom. I didn't accept the check. Not then. But I did accept the truth. I wasn't alone. I never had been. They just worked very hard to make me think I was. Most people wait a lifetime for someone to finally see them. If you've ever had that one person who saved you from breaking, subscribe now to Pure Revenge Stories. And if you never did, comment below. Where were they when I needed them? It started with a text. Just 4 words. Can we talk soon? No greeting. No explanation. No apology. Just the kind of vague, emotionally neutral message that hopes to erase everything that happened before it. I didn't answer. Not because I was being petty, but because I had finally learned how to listen to my silence. And my silence was saying, wait. Just wait. A few hours later, a call came in. My mother. I stared at the screen. Declined it. Then another message, this time from my father. Your sister is going through a lot right now. We're all struggling. Family should support each other. Family. That word had become a bruise. Suddenly, I was valuable again. Suddenly, my phone number worked. Suddenly, my kids mattered. But I knew better now. Because when someone only reaches for you when their ship is sinking, they're not looking for connection. They're looking for a life raft. And I wasn't floating out there anymore, waiting to be picked. I had docked my own boat. 3 days passed. Then they showed up. In person. I heard the knock and looked through the peephole. My sister. Hair disheveled. Eyes red. Holding a tray of cookies like we were in some low-budget apology commercial. My kids weren't home. Thank God. I opened the door slowly. She looked surprised I didn't slam it in her face. "Can I come in?" I didn't move, just leaned against the doorframe. She started talking fast, too fast. Apologies tangled in justifications. Regret coded in excuses. "I didn't know they skipped your kids. Mom and Dad didn't mean it that way. You're reading too much into it." And then, "I need help." There it was. The truth under the frosting. Her business was gone. Her debts were rising. The house she was renovating? Not even in her name. She'd been borrowing money from friends, acquaintances, anyone who would still take her calls. "I just need a place to land for a while, just until I get back on my feet." And there it was again, that tug in my chest. That old wiring that said, be the bigger person. Be the reliable one. Be the one who keeps the family together. But I wasn't that person anymore. I stepped aside, not to let her in. Just enough to speak clearly. "Let's be honest. You didn't come here because you missed us. You came here because I'm the last person left who still answers." She opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand. "I'm not cruel. I'm not heartless. But if you want help, there are conditions." And I laid them out. Clear. Firm. Calm. 1. Therapy, not just for her, but for the family. Real therapy. Group sessions. No more sweeping things under the rug. 2. Accountability, written agreements, financial boundaries, timelines. No more open-ended support that turns into emotional blackmail. 3. Respect for me, for my children. Equal treatment. No more separate standards. She looked at me like she didn't recognize the person speaking. And maybe she didn't. Because this wasn't the quiet sister who smiled through tears. This wasn't the woman who brought side dishes no one touched. This was someone who had seen the fire, walked through it, and come out carrying her own light. "If that's too much," I said, "then no is a full sentence." She stared at me, and for once, said nothing. She left. Not angrily. Not with a slammed door or shouting match. Just quietly. Because deep down, she knew I had changed. And they would never again decide who I was supposed to be. It's been 6 months. And when I look around at my life now, it feels almost unrecognizable. But in the best way. There's a quiet in my home now. Not the kind of silence that used to hang heavy, where everyone walked on eggshells, waiting for the next subtle jab or backhanded comment. This is peace. The kind that hums under everything we do. I moved. Not far. But far enough that my mornings don't start with anxiety in my chest. I found a house with sunlight in every room and a yard where the kids can run barefoot. We planted tomatoes. Not because I'm a gardener, but because we could. Because the only voices guiding our days now are our own. My daughter painted her room yellow. She says it feels like hope. My son started reading aloud at dinner. He's not afraid to speak up anymore. They laugh more now. They look people in the eye. They don't ask if they're allowed to take the last cookie or if someone's going to be upset. Because they know now, their presence is not a burden. It's a gift. And me? I started over. I took that part-time job I'd always told myself I wasn't qualified for. Turned it into a full-time role. Then into something more. I built a little online shop on the side. Handmade things. Real things. Nothing flashy, just honest. For the first time in years, I sleep through the night. And when I wake up, I don't reach for my phone dreading the next emotional invoice from my family. Because they don't hold the pen anymore. The most surprising part? My parents are trying. I didn't expect it. Honestly, I didn't even ask for it. But they started attending therapy. Together. Weekly. Not because I demanded it, but because I told them the truth and then let go. They're learning things. About generational cycles. About favoritism. About how silence is a form of violence. It doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. My kids and their cousins? They're not best friends, but they're on the same field now. Nobody's being benched while the other takes all the shots. Birthday gifts are equal. Compliments aren't lopsided. There's space for everyone. And when my daughter called her cousin my friend last week, I had to step into the hallway just to catch my breath. Because that felt like healing. I've learned something in all this. Something I wish I'd known years ago. You don't owe loyalty to people who never showed you love. You don't have to stay in the room just because they gave you a chair. You can leave. You can build your own table. You can paint your own walls, plant your own tomatoes, raise your kids with the kind of tenderness you were never given, but always deserved. And you don't need anyone's permission to begin again. You just need to choose yourself. Don't wait until your children think disrespect is normal. Subscribe now to Pure Revenge Stories and never miss these true stories that remind us boundaries can save lives. And if you're still not subscribed, why not? Be honest in the comments. We read every one.